It started with a smirk. The camera had barely cut to Sean Hannity before his mouth curled into that familiar curve of condescension. Studio lights gleamed like interrogation lamps off the polished desk. The digital clock above the stage blinked, live in red. The panel smiled, but everyone could feel it. That tension. That game, Congresswoman. Hannity leaned in, voice dripping with false politeness. I just think it's interesting how someone with, well, your background, wants to lecture America about values. The words hung in the air like poison. Flicker passed across Jasmine Crockett's eyes, not rage, not even surprise, but calculation. Her smile didn't falter. Her posture didn't change. But the energy shifted. For a moment, no one breathed. Hannity chuckled. The panel shifted awkwardly. One host looked down, pretending to read notes. Another blinked twice, clearly trying not to react. Jasmine looked at him, looked through him. The silence stretched not because she was caught off guard, but because she was loading her ammunition. Finally she spoke. Sean, let me stop you. Right there. The tone was flat. But her eyes? Fire. See, I didn't come here to audition for your respect. I came here because I know exactly what game you're playing. And I'm not here to play, I'm here to tell the truth. A murmur from the off-camera crew. Someone coughed. Hannity blinked. Once, then again. His smile faltered just slightly. I know what you meant by my background. I've heard it. My entire life. I've heard it in courtrooms, in campaigns, in grocery store lines. You don't have to finish the sentence, Sean. I already did, and I turned it into a law degree. The room shifted. A pin drop moment. One panelist mouthed, "Whoa!" Another whispered, "Oh my God," just off mic. But Jasmine wasn't done. You don't intimidate me. And frankly, the fact that you tried on live TV says more about you than it ever will about me. Silence. Then, that quiet, sharp inhale you hear right before everything changes. But to understand why her words landed like a grenade, we need to rewind. This wasn't just another cable news spat. It was a fault line cracking open on live television, a split-screen glimpse into the American divide. The old guard, smug and sneering, versus the new voice, young, black, and unapologetically unshaken. In recent years, conservative media hadn't just challenged progressive ideals, it had declared war on them. The Hannity doctrine was clear: ridicule, interrupt, dominate. And the preferred targets? Women of color in power, especially those who dared speak without apology. Jasmine Crockett knew that playbook all too well. She'd watched it unfold from her seat in Congress, a front-row view of the culture clash playing out not just on the House floor, but in households across the nation. For every bill she fought for, there were pundits ready to twist her words. For every hearing she dominated, there were headlines, stripping her tone from her truth. But she never backed down. While some flinched from fire, Jasmine had walked through it, a public defender turned congresswoman. She made her name by walking into rooms built to ignore her and making sure they listened. Her viral exchanges during committee hearings weren't accidents. They were declarations, clear, composed, unshakable, and that's exactly what made her dangerous and exactly why Hannity had her in his crosshairs. This wasn't his first time. Hannity had mocked Ayanna Pressley for being angry, labeled Cori Bush radical, and reduced Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to a punchline. His brand was contempt dressed as commentary, and his audience devoured it. So when Jasmine Crockett was booked for a live segment, insiders knew what it meant. It wasn't an interview, it was a setup. Except this time, the script didn't play out the way Hannity expected, because something had changed. The air in America was different, louder, hungrier. A new generation was done asking for room at the table. They were pulling up chairs and speaking with fire in their throats and history in their bones. And Jasmine? She wasn't just there to trade talking points. She was there to plant a flag. What unfolded in that studio wasn't political theater. It was a reckoning. The moment Hannity delivered his bait, that veiled, loaded insult, he didn't just offend a guest. He ignited a movement watching from living rooms, phones, subways, and dorm rooms across the country. What happened next wouldn't just trend. It would explode, because behind that poised silence was a story. Behind that half-smile was decades of grit. And behind that one woman's voice stood millions who had been dismissed, talked over, underestimated, and were done staying quiet. And then the moment came. Live. Unscripted and unforgettable. Sean Hannity doesn't just host a cable show. He commands a fortress. From behind the desk of Hannity night after night, he delivers the gospel of grievance with the polished flair of a seasoned street brawler. His set isn't lit for conversation. It's built for combat. And the man at the center of it isn't a journalist. He's a performance artist whose weapon of choice is control. Talk over, cut off, laugh mid-sentence. Pretend to listen, then pivot to a rehearsed talking point. It's the same formula every time, and Hannity knows it works. His tone is calculated, warm enough to fool the casual viewer, smug enough to keep his audience fed. Feigned civility cloaks contempt. He'll open with a "thanks for being here," but by the second minute it's a verbal ambush. You can see it in the smirk. You can hear it in the way he says "Congresswoman" like it's a punchline, not a title. Hannity has made an art of interruption. Ask Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who once tweeted after a clip aired, "Sean, if you're going to debate me, at least let me finish a sentence." Or Jamal Bowman, who tried and failed to explain criminal justice reform during a segment before Hannity steamrolled him with the classic line, "Just admit it, you want chaos in our cities." It's not debate. It's domination theater. He doesn't invite guests to hear them. He invites them to humiliate them. And his favorite targets? Those who represent the future he fears. Young, unapologetically progressive, often black or brown, always fierce. The ones who aren't afraid to say what their communities live. Because for Hannity, every segment is more than content, it's a control exercise, a ritual of power, and he's the high priest of conservative outrage. He's mocked AOC's voice, referring to her once as Little Miss Bartender with a megaphone. He's questioned Ilhan Omar's loyalty to America on air with the chillingly casual, "I just wonder where her real allegiance lies." He's called the squad a gang of radicals playing dress-up in democracy. There's a pattern, and Jasmine Crockett knew it before she even stepped onto that soundstage. To the millions who tune in nightly, Hannity is less an anchor and more a messenger. His job isn't to inform, it's to reinforce, to recite the talking points, to soothe the loyal, to target the dissenters. He speaks, and the algorithm listens. He accuses, and the base repeats. His influence doesn't just echo, it multiplies. He's not the face of conservatism. He's its amplifier. And in that role, he's cultivated a persona immune to consequence. His interruptions are rehearsed. His insults, plausible deniability. He hides behind the phrase, "I'm just asking questions," even when the questions are soaked in innuendo. That night with Jasmine, it was no different. He leaned forward with that signature expression, part grin, part dare. The line he delivered about her background was carefully engineered. Not explicit enough to spark legal fallout, but clear enough for his audience to nod along. He was baiting her, setting the trap he'd set 100 times before. Because to Hannity, dominance is routine. The studio is his turf. The microphone is his scepter. And dissent, especially when it wears natural hair and speaks with southern steel, is a threat, best neutralized quickly. But this time, he didn't get silence. He didn't get submission. He didn't get a flustered rebuttal to clip and twist later for ratings. This time, something different happened. This time, his usual tactics wouldn't go unanswered. Before the spotlight, before the headlines, before the viral clips, Jasmine Crockett was standing alone in a Texas courtroom, fighting for people the system had already forgotten. No cameras, no makeup teams, just a stack of case files and a voice that refused to shake even when everything else around her did. She wasn't born into power. She earned every inch of it. Raised in Missouri and trained in law, Jasmine didn't chase politics for prestige. She was pulled into it by purpose. As a public defender, she didn't just see the gaps in justice, she lived in them. Day after day, face after face, she stood between the voiceless and the verdicts that would define their lives. She saw how poverty wasn't just a financial status. It was a sentence. She saw how names and skin tone shaped outcomes before a word was even spoken in court. And instead of walking away, she leaned in. That fire, that refusal to look away, is what launched her from courtrooms to Congress. Texas didn't make it easy. The maps were drawn to silence voices like hers. The donors didn't rush to back her. But Jasmine had something better than access. She had clarity. She knew exactly why she was running and who she was running for. And people saw it. They saw it in her grit, in her refusal to water herself down, in her ability to walk into a room that was never meant for her and still speak like she owned it. Once elected, she didn't fade into the background. She got louder, but never reckless. Her voice cut through hearings not with volume, but with precision. She listened more than she spoke, and when she did speak, the room always stopped. One moment in particular launched her into the national spotlight. A congressional hearing on voting rights had devolved, as they often do, into partisan spectacle. One lawmaker questioned whether racism still existed in modern-day elections. Jasmine's response? Calm, cold, devastating. She cited court cases, recited historical parallels, exposed inconsistencies in the argument, all without raising her voice. When she finished, the panel didn't clap. They stared. Twitter, however, exploded. Clips of her response were stitched into TikToks, set to protest music, captioned, "This is how you handle them." For many, it was the first time they saw a woman who looked like them absolutely own the floor of power, not with anger, but with command. Her style unnerves people like Sean Hannity, because she doesn't fit the caricature. She's not loud for show. She's not angry for sport. She's deliberate, surgical, and that's more threatening than any shouted slogan. Because it means she came prepared, not to argue, but to win. Every time Hannity calls someone like her unqualified, he's talking over the years she spent defending the accused for pennies. Every time he calls her aggressive, he's dismissing the discipline it takes to sit through insults and respond with facts, and yet she never bends. That's what sets Jasmine apart. She doesn't play their game, she rewrites the rules. There was a clip where a fellow lawmaker tried to talk over her mid-sentence. She paused, smiled, and simply said, "You'll get your turn. But right now, it's mine." That wasn't just a statement. It was a metaphor for her entire presence in Washington. She represents a generation that's tired of asking, tired of apologizing for taking up space, tired of waiting to be heard. So when the invite to appear on Hannity came, she didn't hesitate. She knew what it was. A setup, a spotlight meant to expose, but she also knew what most underestimated about her. She doesn't walk into these rooms alone. She walks in carrying every courtroom, every client, every voter who had ever been shut out or shut down. And when she speaks, it's with their voices behind her. She didn't come for a fight. She came to remind the nation what a fighter actually looks like. So when she sat across from Hannity, she came armed not with fury, but with facts. From the moment the segment opened, Hannity was in performance mode. He leaned forward in his chair, pen in hand, papers shuffling like a teacher ready to scold a student. Jasmine Crockett sat across from him, her posture steady, eyes locked in. She didn't flinch. Not once. "Congresswoman," Hannity began with that trademark smirk, "you say you care about working Americans, but how exactly does canceling energy projects help the working class?" It wasn't a real question. It was bait laced with spin, detached from any context. Jasmine didn't blink. "I think what actually hurts working families," she replied, "is pretending climate catastrophe doesn't exist because it makes for good television." Before she could finish, Hannity cut in. "Oh, come on now. No one's pretending anything. Let's talk real numbers. How many jobs are lost when your party pushes these so-called environmental reforms?" He interrupted her again before she could answer. "I'm just saying, don't you think it's a bit rich coming from a party that can't even define what an American value is anymore?" Jasmine turned her head slightly. Not a wince, not a glare. Just calculation, quiet, slow, surgical. You could almost see the gears turning behind her calm expression. "I define American values as defending people's rights to live, breathe, clean air, and not get shot in classrooms," she said. The panel shifted, but Hannity pressed harder. He rolled his eyes theatrically. "You always go there. Guns, race, the climate, it's all emotion with you. You're dodging economics because the math doesn't add up." She raised a brow. "No, Sean. You're dodging humanity because the facts don't fit your narrative." That was the first crack. His lips tightened. He tried to smirk again, but this time it looked more like a twitch. He pivoted, hard. "Well, let's talk crime," he said. "You represent a city with rising violence, right? How do you explain that while pushing soft-on-crime policies?" There it was. The Hannity classic. Pivot to crime, pin the blame, frame the guest as detached from reality. But Jasmine didn't flinch. She leaned in, just slightly. "Do you want to talk crime, Sean?" she asked. "Then let's talk about states with the highest gun deaths, many of which are run by your political allies. Or would you prefer to cherry-pick the stats that match you?" "Your monologue?" The smirk returned, stretched thinner now. Hannity tried again. "Congresswoman, you're not answering the question. Why won't your party—" "I've answered every question," she said, voice steady. "What you're really asking is, why won't I let you spin my answers into something they're not?" He went silent. Briefly. The audience in studio and across the country felt it. That rising tension, that teetering balance. The question wasn't if Jasmine would snap. It was how long she could hold this note, this precise, elegant pressure, before unleashing what everyone watching could sense was coming. One panelist glanced nervously between them. Another stared at the table. Hannity shuffled his papers again. "You know," he said, tone sharpening, "you sure do come with a lot of attitude for someone who just got here. Maybe if you focused less on zingers and more on results, and—" That's when she paused, head tilted slightly, eyes narrowed just enough to signal what was about to happen. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't lean back. She didn't blink. And then she delivered the line that silenced the entire panel. There was a breath, not long, not dramatic, but long enough to feel like the air had been sucked out of the room. Sean Hannity sat back, in his chair, arms folded with that smug, dismissive grin still clinging to his face. He had just called her emotional, suggested she wasn't ready for prime time, and hinted that maybe, just maybe, she'd be better off letting the serious people talk policy. The insult had been delivered dressed in politeness, dipped in arrogance. The panel waited. Jasmine Crockett adjusted her mic, just slightly. Then she looked directly at Hannity. "You know what's funny, Sean?" she said, calm as ever. "You invite people like me onto your show, not to listen, but to lecture. You don't want a conversation. You want a caricature. But I'm not here to play that part." Silence. Hannity blinked. "I don't work for you, Sean," she continued. "I wasn't elected to sit here and make you feel comfortable. I was elected to tell the truth even when it makes people like you squirm." The smirk was gone. One of the panelists shifted in their seat, looking down, fiddling with their pen. Another widened their eyes and leaned back like they had just been caught in the splash zone of a controlled detonation. "You keep asking why people like me have so much attitude," she went on, her voice still even, still measured. "Let me answer that for you." She paused. "We're tired, Sean." Another pause. Longer. Waited. Tired of being interrupted. Tired of being labeled. Tired of being told that our intelligence is somehow threatening. You call it attitude. I call it exhaustion from having to justify our presence in rooms we earned our way into. The panel was frozen. You frame questions about crime and economics, and American values like puzzles we need to solve to pass your test. But here's the thing: you don't own the test. You don't even understand the rules. Hannity opened his mouth slightly, then closed it. For once, no interjection. No deflection. Just stillness. "You ask me about my district," she said, "but have you ever been there? Have you ever walked with a mother who lost her son to a stray bullet? Have you ever stood in line at a food bank when the city budget gets slashed?" Another pause. Measured. Precise. "I have. I do. Weekly." Camera angle cut to Hannity. Jaw tight, lips thin, no smirk, no pen shuffling. "And for the record," she added, "I didn't come from a media empire. I came from courtrooms where people's lives were on the line. I've looked into the eyes of kids who thought their life was over before it even began. You call that soft on crime? I call it understanding what survival really looks like." A whisper from someone off screen. The director reportedly mouthed, "Don't cut, let it ride." And when you say things like, "your background," or accuse people like me of playing the victim, she continued, "you're not just talking to me. You're talking to every person watching this who's ever been underestimated, overlooked, or told they were too loud, too angry, too different." The silence was now deafening. Not even the tap of a pen or rustle of paper. Just the hum of the studio lights and the heat of truth filling the space. "I'm not here to entertain your audience," she said. "I'm here to remind them that dignity doesn't need permission, that truth doesn't need approval." She leaned back slowly. "So no, Sean, I don't work for you, and I don't exist to make your panel feel safe. I came here tonight to tell the truth. And whether you like it or not, you just heard it." And with that, she folded her hands in her lap. 1 second passed, then 2. Hannity blinked again. His lips parted, searching for a retort. But nothing came. Nothing fit. Because there was no comeback, no angle, no soundbite, just silence. The panelists stared straight ahead, unsure of where to go next. Someone in the production booth whispered, "Clip that, now!" Within minutes, the clip was online. Within hours, it was everywhere. Twitter exploded. "She cooked him." Instagram. Reels with subtitles and fire emojis. TikToks with Gen Z reactions layered over Jasmine's speech. "I don't work for you" trended within the hour. It wasn't just a takedown. It was a shift. A moment when the old template cracked. The one where the polished host bullies, spins, controls the narrative. Jasmine Crockett didn't just dodge the trap. She flipped it, disarmed it, and handed it back, by morning, even neutral. Commentators were weighing in. She dismantled him with facts, not fury. "This is how you debate without yelling." Jasmine Crockett just gave a masterclass in public poise. And Hannity? He didn't mention the segment again that week. No rerun, no follow-up. Just silence, a rare commodity in his world. But it didn't end there. What happened next would send shockwaves across the country. It began like any other viral moment: a few tweets, a couple of reposts. But within minutes, it became something else. Jasmine drag lit up across timelines with the force of a cultural earthquake. The clip, 37 seconds of Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett calmly, ruthlessly dismantling Sean Hannity on live television, was everywhere. Raw, unfiltered, devastating. It was uploaded, clipped, recaptioned, and reshared across every platform imaginable. On TikTok, Gen Z creators filmed live reactions with open mouths and gasped captions, "The way she said that." One viral edit paired her monologue with Beyoncé's Alien Superstar. Another slowed the footage, adding cinematic music under her closing line, "I don't work for you, Sean." It hit like the final beat of a courtroom drama. On Instagram, celebrity pages like Ava DuVernay's and Quinta Brunson's reposted the full segment. Masterclass, they called it. Composure, clarity, and black woman brilliance. Thousands flooded the comments. Twitter was an inferno. Sean Hannity has finally met his match. She didn't just win, she rewrote the rules of engagement. Imagine walking into the lion's den and walking out with the mic. Even conservative circles couldn't completely ignore it. A few tried to spin it. She was coached. He let her speak too long. It wasn't fair. But others broke rank. Look, that was brutal. One right-leaning account admitted, credit where it's due. MSNBC anchors played the clip in prime time. CNN ran a full segment dissecting the rhetorical power of her response. The New York Times dropped a Sunday feature titled, "The Day Jasmine Crockett Changed the Game." And Hannity? Nothing. No response, no follow-up. No, what I meant was correction. The silence said everything. His show the following night opened on a completely different topic. No mention of the clip, no reference to Crockett. Just a pivot, the kind that comes not from control, but from retreat. Meanwhile, activists seized the moment. Black women's organizations across the country posted messages of solidarity. "This is why representation matters," read one viral thread. "Because when the moment comes, we need someone who won't flinch." Young debaters used her clip in workshops. Political science professors assigned it in media studies classes. High school students posted reaction duets in real time. Eyebrows rising, fists pumping, jaws dropping. And it wasn't just praise. It was inspiration. People saw themselves in Jasmine's calm, in her clarity, in her refusal to shrink, for every time they'd been talked over in a boardroom, for every time their passion was called aggressive, for every moment they bit their tongue just to survive the moment. This time, someone didn't bite, and it changed everything. Commentators called it a seismic media shift, proof that the old formula of bait and bully TV was collapsing in real time. No yelling, no theatrics, just a voice, clear and unbothered, saying, "I don't work for you." It didn't need shouting. It didn't need viral gimmicks. It was power distilled. Suddenly, Jasmine Crockett wasn't just a rising member of Congress. She was a cultural symbol, a presence, a moment. And in the middle of the frenzy, Jasmine dropped one more line, this time for the people. In the days that followed, Jasmine Crockett posted just one statement. No media tour, no press blitz. Just a single post, black background, white, letters. Composure is power, and so is knowing who you are. It wasn't a victory lap, it was a reminder, because the moment wasn't just about Sean Hannity. It wasn't even about her. It was about something far deeper. A truth quietly echoed in classrooms, kitchens, and community centers across the country. That truth: dignity doesn't shout. It shows up. It stands tall. It speaks when it's ready, and only once. Jasmine Crockett didn't win that moment because she yelled louder. She won because she didn't need to. She let the insult sit there, let it expose itself. And when the time came, she didn't swing wildly. She chose her moment, then spoke with a voice sharpened by years of being underestimated and polished by years of rising anyway. Because long before that studio camera turned on, Jasmine had already faced worse. Courtrooms where no one listened. Bills meant to erase the voices of people who looked like her. media clips that misquoted her, rooms where she was the only black woman in the frame. She didn't flinch then. She wasn't about to start now. Her poise wasn't accidental. It was earned through every battle fought without armor, every debate survived without backup. It was the kind of strength that doesn't demand the room, but commands it. And that strength echoed in the single mom watching from her phone during a night shift, in the student who'd been called too much for asking the hard questions, in the veteran who'd been dismissed by the same voices now trying to define patriotism. They all saw themselves in that moment. They saw the choice, not to lash out, but to lean in, to sit in the fire and stay cool, because you don't have to shout to win. You just have to know your truth. And Jasmine Crockett knew hers, that she belonged, that she wasn't a guest at someone else's table. She was building a new one, that clarity made her bulletproof. And maybe that's what rattled Hannity the most. Not that she had the facts, but that she had the nerve to speak them without asking permission. It was more than a comeback, it was a blueprint, a reminder that in a world built to provoke, sometimes the most revolutionary act is not rising to the bait. Sometimes the most dangerous thing you can be is calm, collected, certain of who you are. So here's to the quiet fighters, the unshaken, the ones who wait for the noise to die down and then speak with words that echo louder than any shout. And for those still doubting, maybe it's time you watched that clip one more time. Sean Hannity insulted her. Jasmine Crockett made history. In less than a minute, she turned a loaded jab into a national moment. Not with fury, not with fire, but with clarity, with grace, with truth. And if you felt that really felt it, you're not alone, because it wasn't just about a TV segment. It was about every time someone like you or someone you love was dismissed, interrupted, or spoken over. It was about seeing someone stand tall and realizing that you could too. Moments like this don't just happen. They resonate. They tell us that poise is still power, that facts still matter, and that sometimes the sharpest tool we have is knowing exactly who we are. So if this moment reminded you of your own strength, if it made you pause, or smile, or whisper, "That's right," under your breath, then join us. Subscribe. Stay close, because this isn't the end. It's one of many. More takedowns, more truths, more voices that deserve the mic, because every time dignity wins, we all do.